So we're going to be looking at the battleships that we started off earlier on. You just need to open up Excel by going to the Excel icon. I've got mine just down here, and then look under your recents and hopefully it's listed in there. You just need to open that up. So we've already done all this formatting and preparation. The first thing we're going to do is the named range. We know this is going to be something we're going to use a lot. So let's name that. This is the blue setup. So let's call it blue setup. And I've used the underscore to separate the two words. And that really helps me because I now know that the grid that I'm talking about will be on the blue setup page. So I can choose that. That's now the blue setup. That really helps because how we're going to work this is someone's going to put into here S's for the submarine. And what we want this to do is we want it to count how many S's are there. So we need to use the count if. So I'm going to do equals count if. Remember the open brackets. And now it's asking for the range. Well, we remember what that range is. We just called it. If I put blue, there it is, blue setup. So I double click, comma, and remember I'm looking for S. So I'm going to use speech marks, S, speech marks. It doesn't match if the S is uppercase or lowercase. Countifs don't care. They're not case sensitive. So I've done that, and that's already shown us that there are 4 of them. Now I do want this to be centered and everything else. So I'm going to do that now. And I'm going to just check the font here just to make sure it's 14. So I'm going to use this one, and that's going to be 14 as well. I'm not going to bold it. And because that's what I want to have happen here, if I pull that down, then, oh, hold on, something's gone wrong. Well, of course, what this is doing is looking for S, and this one is also looking for S, and here's the problem. So now I can go into each of these and have to change them to D, B, or A. But actually, no, we need to remember that in computer science, we want to be lazy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the formula by going out to the formula bar, clicking in the formula bar and removing the S, and simply clicking instead where our code is, there. Now I press enter. Still gives us 4, but when I pull that down, let's have a look at the cell references. Blue setup is clearly still there, but the reference to this cell here, U4, has been updated to U5, just as we need. That means this is now looking for D's. If I put a D in, it's going to report that there is 1 D. Now, if you know your battleships, you know that that's not going to work. A submarine is 1 square in size. This is what this tells us, 1 square. But a destroyer is 2 squares. And a battleship is 3 squares. So I've only got half a destroyer here. And if I put in a B, I've got 1/3 of a battleship. And if I put an A there, I've got 1/4 of an aircraft carrier. Notice that 1/2, 1/3, 1/4. If we think about that, that's 1/2, 1/3, and 1/4. So each one is a fraction of the whole. And if I need 4 squares for an aircraft carrier, then one of them is 1/4. So that's useful to know. If I take what I've got for aircraft carrier, for example, it counts it, but I've got 1 of them. So I want to divide that by the number here, and that's going to tell me I've got 1/4. And in fact, that's what I want to do all the way through, but not by 4. Notice I used relative addressing. So if I pull this upwards, it will now show the correct quantity for what I've got here. I've got 4 submarines. I've got 1/2 destroyer, 1/3 battleship, and 1/4 aircraft carrier. And that's exactly what this is showing me here. How come submarines working? Well, that's because I'm dividing by 1. And if I divide by 1, I end up with what I started with. That does help because now if I put more of the D's in, then the destroyer, I've got 2 D's next to each other, that's a destroyer. Now obviously I could mess the game up and put a D over here, but that's just not fair, and in the rules, and when the person starts attacking, they're going to realize I've made a mistake. The other thing I'd like to do at the moment is simply select the blue setup and center, and set that to 14 as well. Noticing the upper is actually 20, so let's set that to 20, just not bold, so they stand out. So we've got that. Now we've got 4 submarines and we're allowed 4, that's what the quantity is telling us. But there's nothing telling me I've done anything wrong by putting another S in there. I've now got 5. Nothing is warning me that there's an error here. So I'm going to use this here. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge these 3 cells together. Merge and center, but then left align. And I'm going to do that all the way down. I'm not going to highlight these and turn them into any special box. I just want something to appear here when I've broken the rules. So what am I looking at? If the value here is greater than the value here. Okay, well we know the function for that. Equals if, open brackets, the value here is greater than the value here, then, well, what do we want it to do? What we want it to tell us? Too many subs. That's nice, that works. What do I want it to do if there aren't too many subs? Well, I'm going to put 2 speech marks to say don't put anything here at all. There are too many subs. There it goes. I'm going to center that within the box, but make sure it's left aligned. I'm going to color it red. Now, the only thing with red is it does really make it hard to read, especially against the blue background. But there's something else. I can't just pull this downwards, because obviously if I start putting more destroyers in, so there's 2 destroyers, 3 destroyers, that's my limit. Over here, I've got too many subs, and that clearly doesn't make any sense. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go back to here. I'm first of all going to capitalize that, and you might not think, well, you will think, why is he doing that? Oh, I missed a space off. Why is he doing that? Well, there is a good reason. So that's going to say too many subs. Obviously there's a good reason, otherwise I wouldn't do it. However, there are too many subs. That's what I've got there. So what am I going to do? Well, what I want to do is something that we've not looked at in one of the lessons, but we're going to look at now. Concatenation. Now we'll look at that later on. We'll be using it lots of times. But concatenation. What is concatenation? That is the joining of 2 or more strings together. How do I connect 2 sentences together? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the function, the formula bar here, just go into the function where it says many. I'm going to put a space after the word many and then put speech marks. Now that's going to have too many with a space. That's good. Then what I'm going to do is going to use the ampersand sign, this and symbol that we frequently use, Shift 7. And then I'm going to click where it says sub. So that's and Q4. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a ampersand the other side. Now I'm just trying to put a space in here because I just don't find that balanced. And then what I'm going to do is delete all but the final S and put a speech mark. No space, just a speech mark. And then the S, subs, plural. So too many, space, and then whatever the word is here with an S tucked onto the end. Maybe you can see why I use capitals, because these are in capitals. So I want it not to stand out that I've used these. So if I press enter now, too many subs. But if I pull that downwards, it will also say too many destroyers. Now the one I want to check is the aircraft carrier. Now aircraft carrier, I'm allowed 1 aircraft carrier. So as long as I put more than one A in, now we can see that ended a bit short. Well, that's all right. The size of these isn't important. I can now pull that further and that's fine. All it's done is extended this whole column, including the messages, but it's not affected anything else, and that works really nicely. So now I've got messages telling me that I've got too many. I'm just going to clear everything by selecting the range and pressing delete. So we've used the count if statement and we've used the if statement. So where was I thinking about using the count A? Well, actually, we're going to do that in this message box. And what we're going to do is I can put S's here, and now I've got warnings that if I put too many S's into here, I'm going to get a warning. Nice little warning there. Oh yes, sorry, shouldn't have that many. But I could put a G. Well, there is no G, and yet nothing tells me I've made a mistake. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix two of our functions together. In fact, we're going to amalgamate a number of these to get an overall formula. So let's see how we do. If, open brackets. So what do I want to say? I want to say if the count of all the symbols in this grid there, well, that's count A. Count A, what's the range? All of those. Oops, that's it. If count A, if the count of all of those is greater than the sum of all these values. So if the number of symbols here is greater than the count here, then I've got too many symbols. Now there's going to be a problem with that. We'll look at that shortly. So if that's true, then you have an incorrect object in your grid. Exclamation mark, speech marks. If nothing, if that isn't broken, then we're going to put speech marks. There you go. I've got an incorrect object in the grid. Again, let's center it. Let's make that red because it's a warning. Let's increase its size. Let's go to a nice 18 should stand out. And now we can clearly see you have an incorrect object, and I can delete that. Okay, so what was I talking about? Well, here's the rub. If I put two D's in, let's just get rid of those to make sure that all works. There we go. So if I put a D in, instantly I get this wrong because this adds up to 4.5, and yet I've got 5 objects. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this empty cell here. I'm going to use something that we looked at very early on when we were looking at formatting cells, or actually looking about the bucket fill very early on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo that division, that divide by P4. And that's very simple. All I've got to do is say equals that multiplied by the number of squares. Now, that's still going to give me 4 here. Doesn't matter about the formatting. But if I pull that downwards, we can now see that that's now re-multiplied this by 2. So we've got the correct number. All I've then got to do with this formula is tell it, no, don't look at that range, but grab the boundary, click with the left-hand mouse button, drag to the side and let go, then press enter, and everything works. Yeah. But this is ugly. It certainly is. But why don't we change the font color to the same color as the background? And that was the trick we looked at before. No one knows. No one knows that our message is based upon a piece of data that no one can see. No one can see the messages. No one can see the side messages. No one can see those numbers. And I can put another destroyer in. That's not going to cause me any problem at all. But if I put a G in, I get the you have an incorrect object. So we've got a lot of things already in place here, already ready for our game to start playing. We've got our layout of our system. There's only a couple of other things for us to look at. Once we've filled this up and we've got everything in place, so we've got one destroyer, and let's put in another destroyer, and let's put in our last destroyer, and now we want our battleship. And another battleship we'll stick up here. We're only allowed 2 of those, so let's put our aircraft carrier there. So if I try to put anything else in, I'm going to get an error message. If I try to put another submarine in, I get too many subs. So I can't really go beyond that, but I'd like a message that tells me, okay, you're finished, now move on. So what we want to do is look at the data here and say, okay, well, if this is correct and you've got everything you want, then we should be finished. And in fact, that's a very easy calculation because we've got 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1. So that's 7, 8, 9, 10 objects. We could actually use this to help us. And that's what this last box is for. If I put equals if, there's our lovely if again, equals if the sum of all of these, close the brackets, is equal to 10, then in speech marks, you're ready to begin playing. Exclamation mark, speech marks, comma, and remember 2 speech marks after to mark this as empty. Okay, so we've got that really nicely. I'm going to press enter. You're ready to begin playing. So we want that centered. This time we want a really nice rich blue to tell us that we're playing this correctly, and we want this to really stand out. So let's put that there. So now I've got that grid, but if I delete everything in there, I've now got everything ready to start playing. The only thing I'm missing is that I can click anywhere, but we've already selected these cells. We go to Format Cells, Protection, and we remove the locked from there. Remember this about protecting the worksheet. Click OK, and at the moment we're not going to use any passwords, but we simply want to go to Review on the toolbar here, go to Protect Sheet, take the tick out of Select Locked Cells so they can't select locked cells, click OK, and now we can click anywhere in here but nowhere else on our grid. That's superb. We're ready now. This is ready to play. We do have to add one thing to here later on, but for now what we want to do is take this grid here and copy it for the greens. So all we're going to do is right click, move or copy, move to end, create a copy, click OK. We've got it here, but that's not going to be blue, so double click, remove that 2 at the end, call it green, and in fact I'm put it in the wrong place, but that's easily solved. All I've got to do is click and hold my left hand mouse button and move it to here and then let go. And now it's got blue setup, green setup, blue play. So I've got everything I'm looking for. The next thing after this is to put a button onto each of these that navigates. And obviously one of the other things we've got to do on the green is just change these colors. And again, you know how to do that. Unprotect the sheet, select these, go back to home, choose the green we want. Oops, I changed the font color. So change the color to that green, do the same for here to that green, choose all of these here to that green, and choose this top boundary to that green. Now we've got the green player and the blue player all ready to go. Lock the sheet here, review, protect, nothing's changed. Okay, now we're ready to play. Just click there. So we're in A1 for there, and we're on A1 for there, and all we've got to do is File, Save to protect everything we've done, close down Excel, and that's it for this lesson. Well done.